In front of 200 guests, my sister grabbed the mic. "I'm pregnant with my sister's husband's baby." I smiled and said, "Perfect timing." She didn't know my private investigator was in the crowd. "Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The last notes of Etta James's At Last were still hanging in the air, soft and sweet like the scent of the 1,000 white lilies I'd insisted on. Our wedding planner, Maria, had gently suggested that maybe 500 would suffice, but I wanted the grand ballroom to feel like an enchanted garden. And for a fleeting, perfect moment, it did. Warren, my husband of exactly 1 hour and 26 minutes, pulled me a little closer, his hand warm on the small of my back. He leaned in, his breath smelling faintly of the expensive champagne we'd chosen, and whispered, "5 years, Loretta. 5 years waiting for this moment. You still take my breath away." I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached all the way up to my eyes. "You clean up pretty good yourself, Mr. Patterson," I whispered back, smoothing the lapel of his tuxedo. I felt the cool, familiar weight of my grandmother's pearls against my throat, my something old and something borrowed. I remembered sitting in my bridal suite just hours before, my mother fastening the delicate clasp. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Your grandmother would be so proud, Loretta," she'd said, her eyes misty. "She always wanted to see you this happy." My best friend, Joanne, was there, fluffing the train of my dress and handing me tissues. "Just try not to cry too much," she'd teased. We spent 2 hours on that waterproof mascara. It was a perfect, peaceful memory, one I'd cling to later. Now, on the dance floor, everything felt just as perfect. The string quartet was playing softly, the candlelight from hundreds of votives was making everyone look beautiful and happy, and the low hum of conversation from our 200 guests was a warm, comforting blanket. I looked around the room, at the culmination of a year's worth of planning, of agonizing over invitation fonts and cake flavors. We'd finally settled on lemon raspberry. It had all been worth it. This was it. This was the first day of the rest of my life, a life I was so excited to build with Warren. He was my rock. The calm, steady man who had walked into my life after my messy, painful divorce from my first husband. He had painstakingly helped me glue the pieces of my heart back together, never pushing, always patient. He was a successful businessman, charming and respected, the kind of man who remembered your favorite wine and always held the door open. My parents adored him. My friends thought he was the one. And I believed it, too. I believed in the future we had planned, the house on the lake we were about to close on, the quiet, comfortable life we were supposed to share. The band leader nodded at us, signaling the end of the slow dance. As the guests began to applaud, I rested my head on Warren's shoulder for just a second, soaking it all in, trying to bottle this feeling. I remember thinking, this is the happiest I have ever been. A perfect, flawless memory. But memories are funny things, aren't they? Sometimes, the most perfect ones are just the calm before the storm. And my storm had a name. It was Brenda. That's when I saw her, a flash of glittering gold weaving through the tables, making a direct line for the stage. I didn't need to see her face clearly to know it was my sister. That sequin gold dress, a size too small and a decade too young, caught the light with every unsteady step she took. She'd had too much champagne again. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach, the one I'd felt 1,000 times before. Brenda had that look, the one that screamed, "Look at me." It was a look I'd seen my whole life, whenever she felt the spotlight wasn't shining brightly enough on her. I felt a slight tremor in Warren's arm as he followed my gaze. I touched his sleeve gently, a silent warning. "She's going for the mic," I said, my voice perfectly even, betraying none of the cold dread coiling inside me. He tensed beside me, his jaw tightening into a hard line. "Should I stop her?" he whispered, a hint of what sounded like panic in his voice. It was a good performance. He looked like a concerned new husband, worried his sister-in-law might make a drunken, embarrassing speech. But I knew better. I knew it was the panic of a co-conspirator whose partner was about to go off script. "No," I said, my hands perfectly steady as I adjusted the lace on my sleeve. My fingers didn't tremble. My voice didn't waver. "Let her." He gave me a strange look, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, but he didn't move. He just stood there, a handsome statue of a man, as my younger sister clumsily climbed the 2 short steps onto the stage, snatching the microphone from the bewildered bandleader's hand. The room began to quiet. 200 guests, sensing the shift in energy, turned their attention to Brenda. Across the hall, I saw my mother half rise from her seat, her hand flying to her mouth, anxiety written all over her face. She knew the formula just as well as I did. Brenda, plus a microphone, plus alcohol, always equaled disaster. A sudden, sharp memory surfaced, so vivid it felt like I was back there. Thanksgiving, 3 years ago. Our whole family was gathered around my parents' long mahogany table. The turkey was carved, the wine was poured. I'd just suffered a miscarriage a week prior, and Warren and I were still reeling, silently grieving in a way that felt heavy and suffocating. We hadn't told anyone except my parents, asking them for privacy. But Brenda, who had a knack for overhearing things not meant for her, decided it was the perfect moment for a toast. She stood up, her glass raised high. "I'd like to make a toast," she'd announced to the silent table. "To family. The ones who are here, and the ones who couldn't make it." She'd looked directly at me, a sickeningly sweet smile on her face. "To the little angel Loretta and Warren lost." The silence that fell over the dining room then was the same kind of silence that was falling over my wedding reception now. A heavy, suffocating silence, pregnant with dread. I looked at Brenda on that stage, in her too tight, too shiny dress, and I knew she was about to do it again. She was about to try and ruin my life, just for the fun of it. Only this time, she thought she had a partner in crime. "Excuse me, everyone." Brenda's voice rang out, slightly slurred but crystal clear through the expensive sound system I'd paid for. "Can I have your attention? I have an announcement to make." The wedding coordinator, Maria, a wonderfully efficient woman who had handled every detail of the day with military precision, looked at me frantically from the side of the room. Her eyes were wide, a silent question: should I cut her mic? I just gave her a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. Let it happen. The show must go on. Brenda swayed a little, basking in the undivided attention. "My beautiful, beautiful sister, Loretta," she continued, gesturing dramatically toward us with her free hand, "just married the wonderful Warren. Aren't they a perfect couple? Let's hear it for them." A few people clapped politely, their applause sounding hesitant and confused. They could all sense that this was not a normal, heartfelt toast from a loving sister. This was something else entirely. Brenda let the sound die out, a smirk playing on her lips. She was enjoying this, drawing it out, savoring the power of holding 200 people captive. And in that pause, I saw it. That malicious little spark she got in her eyes right before she was about to hurt someone for her own entertainment. "And I just want to say..." She trailed off, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper that made the microphone feedback slightly. She leaned in close. "That I have never been happier than I am today. Because today, I'm not just gaining a brother-in-law." She took a deep, theatrical breath, placing her free hand on her stomach. It was a gesture straight out of a soap opera. "I'm pregnant with the Groom's baby." The words seemed to echo in the sudden, absolute silence. For a full 3 seconds, nobody moved. It felt like the entire world had stopped breathing. And then came the chaos. A collective gasp swept through the room like a physical wave. I heard the sharp scrape of a chair being pushed back, the distinct clatter of a silver fork dropping onto a porcelain plate. Someone near the back let out a small, shocked scream. A wineglass, knocked over by a trembling hand, hit the polished floor and shattered, the sound like a gunshot in the tense, silent air. And cutting through it all was my mother's cry, a raw, wounded sound that was half scream, half sob. "Brenda!" The whole world seemed to spin in slow motion. I could see every face, every reaction. My Aunt Sylvia's look of utter disbelief. My cousin Marcus's jaw hanging open. The pitying glances, the morbidly curious stares. They were all looking at me, the jilted bride, standing there in my $1,000 white dress, a perfect cliché of public humiliation. They were waiting for me to fall apart. To scream, to cry, to run from the room. Brenda was waiting for it, too. This was her moment. Her ultimate victory in a lifetime of petty jealousies. But I didn't give it to her. Instead, I stood there, the grandmother's pearls still cool against my throat, and I smiled. It wasn't a fake smile, plastered on to hide the pain. It wasn't a shocked, trembling smile of disbelief. It was a real, genuine, and, I have to admit, slightly terrifying smile. It was the smile of a woman who had been waiting for this exact moment for 4 long, agonizing months. Perfect timing, I said, and my voice, amplified by the microphone still clipped to my dress from our vows, carried clearly across the stunned reception hall. Brenda blinked at me from the stage, her drunken triumph faltering. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. She'd wanted tears, rage, a scene. She lived for scenes. This calm, smiling woman in the white dress was not part of her script. "Loretta," she stammered, leaning back into the microphone as if for protection. Her bravado was gone, replaced by a note of confusion. Did you hear what I said? I'm pregnant. With Warren's baby. Yes, I heard you, I said, my voice still light, conversational. I took a deliberate step forward, away from Warren's rigid, frozen form. You and my husband have been having an affair. The gasps started again. I know. The whispers in the room grew to a roar. I could feel Warren's panic radiating off him in waves. He looked like a cornered animal. You know? Brenda's voice had lost its triumphant edge. It was small now, and uncertain. Of course, I know, Brenda, I said, and for the first time, I felt a memory, not of pain, but of clarity, surface. It was 4 months ago. I was in my home office, late at night. I couldn't sleep, a restless anxiety I couldn't name gnawing at me. Warren was supposedly on a business trip in Chicago. On a whim, I'd logged into our credit card account online, just to check a balance. And that's when I saw it. A recurring monthly charge for a rental company called Riverside Apartments. I'd never heard of it. We didn't rent any apartments. My first thought was fraud. But then I saw other charges. A dinner for 2 at a romantic little Italian place across town I'd wanted to try. Flowers from a boutique florist. Jewelry. A sickening cold dread washed over me. It wasn't fraud. It was a secret life. My hands had been shaking then, as I clicked through months of statements, the evidence piling up, each charge a small betrayal. I had sat in the dark for an hour, just staring at the screen, the pieces of my perfect life crumbling around me. I had cried then. I had grieved for the man I thought I married. But tonight, there were no more tears left. I've known since last March, right? I continued, my voice steady. That business conference in Miami where you just happened to run into him. I let that sink in. I could see the gears turning in her head, the drunken fog finally clearing, replaced by a cold, dawning horror. I wasn't the victim in her play. I was the director. And the final act was just beginning. You can't know that, Brenda whispered into the mic, her words meant for me but broadcast to everyone in the silent hall. Oh, but I do, I said, and I started walking toward the stage. My heels clicked deliberately on the polished dance floor, a steady, rhythmic sound that cut through the tension. Every eye in the room followed me. It wasn't a walk of shame, it was a procession. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. Just like I know about the apartment. Unit 3B at the Riverside Complex. The one Warren rented for your little afternoon meetings. Warren finally found his voice. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm. "Loretta, stop it," he hissed, his grip surprisingly strong. I stopped and looked down at his hand on the delicate lace of my sleeve, then up into his panicked eyes. I didn't raise my voice. "Don't touch me, Warren," I said, my voice low and cold. I pulled my arm away, and he flinched back as if he'd been burned. I turned my back on him. "Shoo," I said dismissively over my shoulder. "It's Brenda's moment. She's been planning this for weeks. Haven't you, Bren?" I was at the foot of the stage now, looking up at her. Her carefully contoured face had gone pale and blotchy under her makeup. "You even bought that dress specifically for today," I continued, my voice conversational again. "Charged it to Warren's secret Visa card, if I remember correctly. The one he keeps for business expenses. Is that what you are, Brenda? A business expense?" How could you possibly know that?" she breathed, her knuckles white as she gripped the microphone stand. "Because unlike you and Warren, I pay attention," I said, my voice hardening just a little, the first crack in my calm facade. "I notice things. I notice when my husband, a man who prides himself on his work-life balance, suddenly starts working late 3 nights a week. I notice when my sister, who has never shown an interest in anything beyond her own reflection, suddenly develops a passion for his boring hobbies, like sailing and antique maps. I notice when hotel charges and rent payments for an apartment I've never seen start appearing on credit card statements." I turned from her to face our guests, my voice ringing with a newfound strength. "I apologize for the drama, everyone," I said sincerely. "This isn't how I imagined my wedding day. But since my sister chose this moment to share her news, I thought I should share mine as well." I walked over to the head table, where my small clutch purse was sitting next to a half-empty glass of champagne. I reached inside and pulled out a thick, white envelope. My hand didn't shake. I felt a profound sense of calm settle over me. The waiting was finally over. I held the envelope up for everyone to see. "This day," I announced to the room, "has been full of surprises. But I have one more." I scanned the crowd, my eyes landing on a table near the back, tucked away in the shadows. "Marshall? Would you mind?" A man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit stood up. He was tall, with a no-nonsense demeanor, and he looked completely out of place at a wedding, which was exactly why I'd hired him. I remembered my first meeting with him, 3 months ago. I'd found his name through a friend of a friend, a woman who had gone through a nasty divorce. We met in a quiet, discreet coffee shop downtown. I was a nervous wreck, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee cup. I'd laid out the credit card statements on the table between us. "I think my fiancé is having an affair," I'd whispered, the words feeling like poison in my mouth. "With my sister. I need to know the truth. I need you to find out everything. This will be crucial for the divorce." Marshall had looked at the papers, then at me, his eyes kind but professional. "The truth can be painful, Loretta," he'd warned me. "Are you sure you're ready for it?" "I'm ready," I had said, my voice gaining strength. "I need irrefutable proof." Now, as he stood up in my reception hall, I saw my cousin Marcus, a corporate lawyer, almost fall out of his chair. I heard him whisper loudly to his wife, "My God, that's Marshall Morrison. The private investigator. My old boss hired him for his custody case. The guy is a shark." "Yes, he is," I said pleasantly, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Marshall, if you would." Marshall made his way forward, pulling a sleek tablet from his jacket pocket. He nodded at me professionally as he passed. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson." "Actually," I said, a small smile playing on my lips, "just call me Loretta. I'll be going back to my maiden name soon enough." The collective intake of breath from the crowd was almost comical. Warren made a strangled noise behind me. Marshall reached the front and, with a few taps on his tablet, connected to the huge projection screen we had used earlier for our romantic slideshow of couple photos. The smiling, happy pictures of Warren and me were gone. The screen was now blank, waiting. A blank slate for the truth. Warren finally moved, rushing to my side. "Loretta, no. Please, don't do this," he begged, his voice low and desperate. He was trying to appeal to the woman he thought I was, the gentle, forgiving woman he had married. He hadn't realized that woman had died 4 months ago in a dark office, staring at a credit card statement. "We can talk about this. Privately." "We are talking about it, Warren," I said reasonably, turning to face him. "Right now. In front of all of our friends and family. All of these witnesses. I think my lawyer will find that very helpful." His face crumpled. It was the first time I had ever seen him look truly powerless. It was a good look on him. "These are from March 15th, Marshall said, his voice professional and devoid of emotion, cutting through the tense silence as the first images appeared on the screen. "Mr. Patterson and Ms. Chen at the Marlington Hotel in Miami." The photos were crystal clear, high resolution. There they were, Warren and Brenda, standing under the hotel's tacky neon sign. Brenda was laughing, her head thrown back in a way that I now recognized as completely fake, while Warren looked at her with an expression of adoration I hadn't seen on his face, directed at me, in years. That was the first real sting of pain I'd felt all night. The next photo showed them in the lobby, Brenda's hand tucked possessively in Warren's arm. Then, in the elevator, their faces close together, whispering. And the final shot of the series, the two of them entering their hotel room together, Warren swiping the keycard as Brenda looked over her shoulder, a smug, triumphant look on her face. A low murmur rippled through the guests. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on Brenda, who was staring at the screen, her mouth hanging open. Warren flinched as if he'd been physically struck. March 22nd, Marshall continued, swiping to the next set of photos. The screen now showed the exterior of the bland, beige riverside apartment complex. More photos followed in quick succession. Warren carrying groceries into the building. Brenda arriving in her distinctive pink Mercedes, a car she cried to our parents about needing because her old one was unreliable. And then, a shot of the two of them on the balcony, embracing, a kiss so passionate it made my stomach turn. They looked like a real couple, building a real life, funded by my money and my trust. April 3rd, April 12th, May 1st, Marshall narrated like a tour guide from hell, as a montage of their secret meetings flashed across the screen. Them holding hands in a park, like teenagers. Them laughing over dinner at a secluded restaurant I'd always wanted to go to. A whole secret life, a whole separate relationship, laid bare for everyone to see. "Stop!" Brenda shrieked into the microphone, the sound screeching with feedback. "Stop it! This is illegal. You can't do this. It's an invasion of privacy." "Actually, everything was obtained legally," Marshall said mildly, not even glancing at her. "Public places, no expectation of privacy. Your client should have known that." He was speaking to her date, who was already halfway out the door. "But my favorite," I said, cutting through the noise and stepping forward again, my voice dripping with false sweetness, "is from 2 weeks ago. Marshall, would you play the video?" The screen changed. It was security footage, grainy but clear, from a high-end jewelry store downtown. There they were again, leaning over a glass counter, looking at rings. The audio kicked in, muffled but clear enough to be understood by everyone in the now deathly silent room. On the screen, my sister, Brenda, held up her hand, admiring a large, gaudy diamond ring that glittered under the store's bright lights. Her voice, tinny and sharp through the ballroom speakers, filled the reception hall. "It's beautiful, Warren," she cooed. "But when are you going to leave her? I'm tired of sneaking around." And then came my husband's voice. The same voice that had whispered vows of eternal love and fidelity to me just hours before. "After the wedding, I told you," he replied, his tone impatient, like he was explaining something to a child. "I need her inheritance from her father to pay off the business loans first. Her dad's health isn't great, it won't be long. We just have to be patient." Once that money is secured, maybe 6 months, a year tops, then we can be together. I'll be free, and we'll have everything we want. And the promotion he promised you? Brenda asked, her voice laced with greed. The one that comes with the higher salary? That too, Warren confirmed. It all hinges on me being the perfect son-in-law. Just for a little while longer. The video paused on a close-up of Brenda's ecstatic face as she tried on what looked suspiciously like an engagement ring, holding her hand out, admiring it. The image burned onto the screen. The plot wasn't just about an affair, it was a cold, calculated financial scheme. The reception hall erupted. It was complete pandemonium. My mother, who had been held up by my aunts, finally let out a choked sob and fainted into my uncle's arms. My father, a man I had never seen lose his temper, broke free from my uncles and lunged toward Warren, roaring his name. "You son of a bitch! I'll kill you!" 2 of my cousins tackled him before he could reach the stage. Across the room, I saw Brenda's date finally make it out the door, practically running. Warren grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the delicate lace, his face a mask of desperation and rage. "Turn it off," he hissed. "Loretta, please. You've made your point. We can talk about this." The chaos swirled around me, a symphony of my own making. I looked at the screen, at the image of the 2 people who were supposed to love me most, plotting my financial and emotional ruin. I looked at the wreckage of my wedding, at the faces of my stunned guests. And I felt nothing but a cold, clean sense of clarity. Everything was finally out in the open. The lies were burned away, and only the raw, ugly truth remained. Warren was shaking my arm, still pleading. "Loretta, please." I looked him dead in the eye. The handsome face I had fallen in love with 5 years ago now looked weak and pathetic. The man I had promised to love and cherish just 3 hours ago was a stranger to me. A lying, cheating, thieving stranger. The time for talking was over. The time for consequences had begun. Warren screamed, his voice cracking, "Loretta! Stop this madness!" The entire room was a blur of motion and sound, my father shouting, my mother being fanned by my aunts, chairs scraping, people yelling. I looked at Warren's desperate face, then back at the frozen image of his betrayal on the screen. It was all over. If you're still listening, if you've followed me this far into the chaos, could you do me a small favor? Please like this video and just comment with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you're here, that you're on this journey with me. Your support truly means the world to me, more than you know. Just type the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. I took a deep breath, the noise of the room fading into a dull roar in my ears, and looked at Warren, whose hand was still clamped on my arm. "We are talking about it, Warren," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "In front of all these witnesses. Which, as I said, is going to be very helpful for the divorce proceedings." "You planned this," he accused, his eyes wide with a horrified realization as he finally understood the scope of what was happening. "You knew. You let us get married." I finally laughed. A short, sharp, bitter sound that held no humor. "Oh, Warren. You really should have read that prenup more carefully. I paid my lawyer a lot of money for it." I leaned in, my voice a whisper meant only for him. "Remember Article 4? The one my lawyer insisted on, the one you barely glanced at? The infidelity clause. It specifically states that in the event of proven adultery, the offending party forfeits any and all claim to my premarital assets and any future inheritance. You signed it without a second thought, didn't you? Too busy dreaming about my father's money." I pulled my arm free from his grasp. "Let me spell it out for you and for everyone else. You get nothing. No trust fund, no shared assets, no alimony. Nothing." I let my voice rise again to project to the room. "But it gets worse. You see, while you were busy planning your future, I was busy looking at your past. You've been embezzling from my father's company to pay for your little love nest with Brenda. What? The roar came from my father, who had shaken off my uncles and was standing there, his face purple with rage. I didn't take my eyes off Warren, whose face had gone from pale to ghostly white. Did you think I wouldn't audit the books when I found out about the affair? I asked him conversationally. Really? You know I have a forensic accounting degree. It was the first thing I did. I found the fake invoices, Warren. Consulting fees paid to a shell company you set up last year. A classic, clumsy move. Did you really think my father wouldn't eventually notice a 10% drop in his quarterly salary payout? You've siphoned off nearly $50,000. It's a felony. With the documentation I have, which my lawyer has copies of, you'll be lucky if you don't end up in jail. His face crumpled. He had thought he was playing a game with a naive, love-struck woman. He had forgotten he was married to an accountant. He had planned for my emotions. He never planned for my intelligence. Brenda had dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a piercing squeal of feedback that made everyone wince. She was scrambling down from the stage, trying to flee, but in her haste, her high heel caught in the hem of her ridiculous sequin dress, and she went sprawling onto the dance floor. She landed in an ungraceful heap, a tangle of gold fabric and flailing limbs. For a moment, she just lay there, sobbing. I didn't feel a shred of pity. I felt empty. Oh, and Brenda, I called after her, my voice ringing out in the sudden quiet that followed the feedback shriek. Congratulations on the pregnancy, though. You might want to get a paternity test. She froze on the floor, pushing herself up on her elbows, her face a tear-streaked, makeup-smeared mask of horror. That's right, I said, walking toward her, my white dress gliding over the floor she lay on. Warren isn't the only one who's been busy. His name is Trevor, isn't it? He's a bartender at the Bellagio in Vegas. He was quite charmed by you during your girls' trip last month. Charmed enough to talk to my investigator about the 3 nights you spent together. It seems determining legal custody for the baby might get a little complicated. Her face crumbled completely. The last lie, the one she had used as her ultimate weapon, was now turned against her, exposed as just another pathetic, desperate ploy. This is insane, Warren muttered, stumbling toward me and grabbing my arm again, harder this time. Loretta, you can't do this to us. To the family. I looked down at his hand on my white sleeve, then up at his face. The spell was well and truly broken. There was nothing left. No love, no anger, just nothing. He was a stranger. Security? I called out calmly, my voice steady. 2 uniformed men appeared as if from nowhere. Because, of course, I'd hired security. I had planned every single detail of this day. They moved toward Warren with practiced efficiency. Ma'am, one of them asked. Mr. Patterson is no longer welcome at this event, I said clearly. Loretta, no. Think of our life. Think of what people will say, he pleaded as they took his arms. I am Warren, I said, my voice as cold and hard as a diamond. And I'm starting a new one. This is my wedding, too, he protested, struggling uselessly against their professional grip. No, I corrected, looking him in the eye one last time. This was your wedding. Now, it's my divorce party. They escorted him out, with Brenda scrambling to her feet and chasing after them, mascara streaming down her face, wailing his name. The heavy doors of the reception hall swung shut behind them, and once again, a profound silence fell. I stood there for a moment in the silence, the queen of a ruined castle. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, waiting to see what I would do next. I took a deep breath, the scent of lilies suddenly cloying and overwhelming. Then I turned back to my stunned, silent guests. Well, I said, smoothing down the front of my dress and forcing a bright smile. I know this isn't the reception you were expecting. A nervous laugh rippled through the room. Believe me, it's not what I was expecting either. But the good news is, the catering is already paid for. The sea base is excellent, by the way. The bar is open for another 3 hours, and I've given the band a new playlist. I raised my chin, my voice growing stronger with every word. So please, stay. Eat, drink, and celebrate with me. Not the marriage I thought I was getting, but the freedom I'm choosing instead. For a moment, nobody moved. The air was thick with shock and second-hand embarrassment. Then, my college roommate, Joanne, a fiery redhead who had seen me through my first divorce with a bottle of tequila and a stack of bad movies, stood up. She looked prouder than I'd ever seen her. She raised her champagne glass high. To Loretta, she called out, her voice ringing with conviction and love. For having bigger balls than any man in this room. The room erupted. The tension broke like a fever. Suddenly everyone was on their feet, clapping and cheering, not out of pity, but out of respect. My mother, having recovered from her faint, was making her way toward me, tears streaming down her face, but this time, they were tears of pride. "Oh, honey," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "I am so sorry. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you would have tried to fix it," I said, hugging her back. "You and Dad would have suggested counseling or family meetings. And I didn't want it fixed, Mom. It was broken beyond repair. I wanted it over." I looked around at the scene. But the wedding, all this money, it was worth it. To see their faces when the truth came out. My father appeared at my other side, his rage replaced by a grim determination. "The embezzlement," he started. "About 50,000, I told him quietly. "I have all the documentation. It's enough to prosecute, if you want to. He won't be able to touch your company or my inheritance ever again." He nodded, looking older, suddenly tired. "I always knew there was something off about him," he said, more to himself than to me. The bandleader tentatively approached me, looking terrified. Ms. Chen? Should we really keep playing?" "Absolutely," I said with a grin. "Start with Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. And turn it up loud. I have a bouquet to throw." The rest of the reception was the most surreal and wonderful party I have ever attended. People danced. They ate. They kept coming up to me, not with condolences, but with congratulations. My Aunt Sylvia hugged me and whispered, "Good for you, honey. Never let anyone dim your light." My cousin Marcus came over, shook my hand, and said, "If you ever need a lawyer who will absolutely destroy someone in court, you have my number." The next day was a blur of logistics. I woke up not in a honeymoon suite, but in a quiet hotel room I'd booked under my maiden name. The silence was overwhelming. For a moment, the weight of it all hit me. I was 54 years old and starting over, again. I allowed myself to cry for exactly 10 minutes. I cried for the love I thought was real, for the future that was a lie. Then I wiped my tears, ordered room service, and got to work. My lawyer filed the divorce papers that morning. The restraining orders against both Warren and Brenda were next. The weeks that followed were filled with the mundane tasks of dismantling a life. Packing boxes. Changing names on bank accounts. Talking to lawyers. But amidst the tedious work, there were moments of unexpected joy. Joanne helped me move into my new, smaller apartment. We ordered pizza and drank cheap wine on the floor, surrounded by boxes, and laughed until our sides hurt. My father, true to his word, pursued the embezzlement charges. Warren, facing jail time, settled the divorce quickly, disappearing from my life with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal debt. My mother confessed, tearfully, that Brenda's behavior was a pattern they had ignored for too long. They had spoiled her, always cleaning up her messes, from the petty theft at her jobs to the constant lies. They finally cut her off financially, forcing her to face the consequences of her actions for the first time in her life. I haven't spoken to her since the wedding. I don't know if I ever will. Some betrayals cut too deep. 6 months after the divorce party, I packed the last of my things and moved to Seattle for that job I'd been considering. It was a fresh start in a city where no one knew my story. I used the money from the sale of my house, to finally open my own firm, Chin Forensic Accounting. My motto is simple: helping women find the truth in the numbers. I specialize in divorce cases, finding the hidden assets, the secret accounts, the financial betrayals that husbands like Warren think they're so clever at hiding. It's my way of turning my greatest pain into my greatest purpose. Sometimes, at night, I stand on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking the lights of the city, and I think about that day. I think about the white dress and the shattered dream. But I don't feel sadness anymore. I feel a quiet, profound sense of peace. The truth, as painful as it was, set me free. So, that's my story. It's a reminder that sometimes, the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a much, much better one. Thank you for listening.